episode 377 of Retro Encounter, RPG fans' mostly weekly, currently bi-weekly podcast of many topics. My name is Zach Wilkerson, and I will be your host today. And today we are here to talk about Final Fantasy VI, mostly because it was recently released as a pixel remaster, also because it is one of the best games of all time, in your humble host's opinion. But before we get into my pretentious ramblings about this game, let us introduce the panelists, starting with you, Lucy.
Hi, I'm Lucy Gray. I'm part of RPG's fans' social media team. I mostly cause havoc throughout the website, and I have been a very, very long time fan of Final Fantasy VI. I've had a love-hate relationship with some of the aspects of this game, but I am
don't you
so...
worry, we will get to them.
Shush. So I'm happy to talk about it. I'm really glad that I had an excuse to play this once again and try and fix some of these screw-ups.
Excellent. It's always a good opportunity, Retro Encounter is. And next, Aleks Franiczek.
Yeah, hi everyone. My name's Aleks Franiczek, and I'm fairly new to RPG fan, but I've dabbled in a couple things so far, including features, review, and I did a podcast already on Lost Odyssey with y'all. And yeah, I mean I love this game. It's probably my favorite game of all time, just kind of like based on like my history with it and kind of how much it meant to me playing it when I was younger. Yeah, I recently wrote that Final Fantasy ranking that I hope didn't get too many people upset.
I mean, it was wrong, but it was good. Just kidding, sort of.
Final Fantasy 15 rules. I won't apologize.
Yeah, it's fine. It's better than Lost Odyssey, so we can all agree on that.
Ouch.
It's true. And next up, Ben Love.
Yeah, hi. My name's Ben Love. So I've actually never played Final Fantasy VI before playing it for this podcast. So this is a good experience for me to finally get to experience what people have been talking about forever. And I actually don't have a huge history with the Final Fantasy series in general. So it's really cool to kind of go back to earlier ones in the franchise, and it makes me want to play the ones that I haven't played. So
awesome. Yeah, I mean, we were gonna record this episode, I was looking for somebody who had not played Final Fantasy VI before, and I was worried that everybody on staff had. So honestly, this is the best time for you to have never played Final Fantasy VI. So thank you, Ben. I really appreciate it. And I'm going to say you're a longtime listener, first time caller, Lucas Greene.
Hi, glad to be here. Just joined up with RPG Fan a few months ago, and Final Fantasy VI is pretty much my first RPG that really got me into them, so long history with it, something I've always really enjoyed.
Yeah, so we have a variety of experiences with Final Fantasy VI, and Final Fantasy VI is sort of a remarkable game on so many fronts. It was obviously developed by Nobuo Uematsu, but it also had so many other people working on it. The creator of Kingdom Hearts worked on it. Tetsuya Takahashi of Xenosaga and Xenogears created the mechs in this game. It feels like we always talk about Chrono Trigger as an all-star team of RPGs, but in a lot of ways, I feel like Final Fantasy VI does that as well. While it's more square driven, it is a remarkable game. And I think for a lot of reasons, and partially because of the talent that was working on it, and how small that team was, and how that talent has gone on to do such incredible work. But before we get into talking about Final Fantasy VI proper and everything that Final Fantasy VI is, I think I want to give some context for the listeners just very quickly, and we'll try to keep it to a minute or two, about our history with the Final Fantasy series, our history with Final Fantasy VI specifically. We've kind of covered this a little bit, but I want to make sure everybody's sort of situated here. in terms of listeners and where we're coming from. So we'll start with you, Alex. We've heard that Final Fantasy VI is your favorite game of all time. We know you've played them all, but kind of give us a little bit of background on your history with the Final Fantasy series.
Yeah, for sure. So I grew up youngest of three brothers, both like 4 years and 8 older than me. And so I grew up with the Super Nintendo and PlayStation predominantly as like my main entryway into video games. And Final Fantasy VI was one that definitely stood out to me. I kind of experienced it as a spectator, firstly, just before I could even really play video games well enough to progress far. I would watch my brothers playing it, and what really fascinated me about this game was not only that like the artwork, the sprite work was just like above any of the other ones that I saw them play, but also just kind of the nuance around the characters is what really stuck out to me and
Yeah.
made me appreciate video games as kind of like a narrative medium a lot more than I had ever really thought about before. Like especially like because kind of we're only going to touch on sort of the first half of this game here, but first half of this game is very much kind of presenting like just a really well paced and structured JRPG with a colorful cast of characters,
Mhm.
very much a lot of kind of Star Wars type um, allusions to like an evil empire. I
I've
mean,
played Final
we
Fantasy 12. Okay.
yeah, yeah. I mean, like that's just a whole other level. That's not illusion. That's plagiarism.
That's just I agree.
But yeah, like having Biggs and Wedge obviously at the beginning is a big one. But yeah, it just introduced you to this like colorful cast of characters from different walks of life, and developed them in an interesting way, and then kind of in the second half of the game, like kind of even developed them further, kind of
Yeah.
showed a lot more nuance behind their
Yeah.
personalities and kind of like personal struggles and things like that that just was not in other video games.
I agree.
And just it for that reason, this game has stuck in my heart forever, and I've come back to it regularly.
Yeah, I mean, you touched on a lot of what I like about Final Fantasy VI there, and I'll get into some of those things later. But Lucy, what's your history with the Final Fantasy series at large, and also sort of Final Fantasy VI?
So it's interesting because I came from a household that the only gaming system I ever had was a Game Boy growing up, and my mother regretted that pretty quickly, giving that to me. So I actually only saw Final Fantasy VI being played by a friend for a short period of time before, well, into college. I got back into gaming, got had a chance to actually get my hands on a copy of the game, and I started really um I had seen other Final Fantasy games, but there were some things that just struck me about Final Fantasy VI, just that there isn't necessarily a singular character that is the sole driving force, that there's
Yeah.
this wonderful cast of characters that all have their moment as the main character that really struck me. And so then um, I was able to play a PSX version of the game. I got an original copy by sheer luck. Um, and I played it on my poor, dearly departed, retrofitted PlayStation 3, um, and learned very quickly that I have a temper when it comes to things that require you to do things in a certain order, or else it doesn't go your way.
Uh, this game does do that.
But at the same time, the fact that I stuck with it and kept going really it tells about how much this game is such a driving force and such a wonderful, well told story. And the fact that you don't have to do everything in order is such a wonderful diversion from some of the other Final
Yeah.
Fantasy games. And the fact that you can often go back to areas and go back and find new things, or even, if you leave a chest alone, it might turn into something better, or you might never see that chest again, and you have to sort of weigh your options,
Mhm.
was a new concept for me for gaming, and I was just like, I like this. I have played 3 versions of this game. I have played the PSX version. I have played the iOS version up until when it was broken for a good portion because Square Enix just gave up on iOS for a little while and they just stopped updating it and iOS updated and the game was broken. And I was like, well, guess I'm not finishing this. And then finally, for this podcast, I ended up getting the Pixel remaster and I was just like, oh my god, I get to play. Oh my god, I forgot how much I hate some of these parts.
I know you're
And
talking about Zozo. Yeah, I understand.
no, I like Zozo. Shut up.
Ugh, ugh, ugh.
Zozo's great with random encounters off. Really, really good time.
I actually liked it just fine with random encounters off this time. So Lucas, what's your history with the series and Final Fantasy VI specifically?
So, like I said, grew up. This was one of my first RPGs that I ever played, and definitely the one that I was most invested in. I remember renting it at Blockbuster when I was a kid, and it was the one that I kept renting so that I could actually finish it. So
No one erased it, at least.
At least nobody erased my save.
That's good, because that happened to me so many times.
I have played it through many, many times, many versions. When I was in college, I would go through and I found a bunch of different like fan translations, and I've recently gone through a couple of the more well-known ROM hacks for it, which Final Fantasy XVI Edition is complicated. And yeah, it's probably my favorite Final Fantasy, one of my favorite games of all time. The characters and story are great. I love the mechanical aspects of it as well. As far as all the different Final Fantasies go, I think it's got kind of a good balance between the older style of Final Fantasy and the newer style. It's kind of like right on the hinge in a lot of ways between those two.
Yeah, I agree. Yeah, I mean, I think it's so much of the storytelling is remarkable about it, in terms of that, but also in terms of like it trying to press forward into gameplay, and I think it's a really good insight. So Ben, we know that you're a first-time Final Fantasy VI player, but talk about your history with the series in general, and also why now? Why haven't you played Final Fantasy VI before?
My history with the Final Fantasy series is kind of scattershot. The first Final Fantasy game I ever played was actually Final Fantasy 1 on the Dawn of Souls collection on the GBA. And then I played Final Fantasy 2 on that as well. And then I've played Final Fantasy 3, the DS version. I've played Final Fantasy 5 on GBA. And then the only other Final Fantasies I've played are 12.
That is
Because I'm a big
fascinating history.
yeah,
It's so specific.
and I
love
can
it.
get into that in a second. So I played 12 because I'm a huge Yosumi Matsuno fan.
Mhm.
So I had to play that, and then I've also played 15, which I'm not a huge fan of.
Hmm.
You don't like Dude, Where's My Car, the Final Fantasy edition?
So, I guess one thing I'll say, you might be able to tell from the Final Fantasy games that I have played, is that I'm definitely much more of a mechanics and gameplay over story person, and that definitely plays into how I feel about this game. But yeah, that's my history. So I'm missing like a huge swath, I know, of the like Final
Yeah.
Fantasy games that are very beloved. So
Yeah, it's interesting because yeah, and we'll talk about your thoughts on the gameplay, which I'm really curious about. Because like I feel like my personal ability to judge this game fairly is gone. Like there's no way. I love this game. Like when I first got this game, I got it on Christmas Day. On Christmas Day in the morning. And then I had to stay at my dad's all day. You know what my dad didn't have? A Super Nintendo.
Mm.
So like I was just sitting there and I was just like flipping through the book all day. Like when we said like the book, like games used to come with like these fairly detailed guidebooks, even in the Super Nintendo days. And I was just reading it, and like even now, I'm sure whoever owns it now, because I don't own it anymore. Long story. Um, it looks at it and like, who read this 700 times? And the answer is Zach Wilkerson. um, but like to give that away, like I had been a member of like the Final Fantasy family for a long time before that. Like I started playing Final Fantasy during the NES era. My grandparents really into it. They walked me through it. They would tell me what to do, and I played Final Fantasy. And then, like the first time I saw them playing Final Fantasy 2, it was like my whole brain melted. I was like, "How does a game look this good? How is it this dramatic? How is it this good?" And I loved that. And then when Final Fantasy 3 finally came into my hands, I can't believe I had to wait 24 hours to play it. It was unacceptable. But like I've been I've played every numbered Final Fantasy except for 13, which I've started but just haven't finished, and also 11, I guess. So like I'm a huge Final Fantasy fan, and so much of Final Fantasy, especially since 6, is driven by what 6 is and what it was. That I think that my love for it is partially driven by that. Like for a long time, I would have said that Final Fantasy 4 was one of my absolute favorite Final Fantasy games, but I think that nowadays 6 surpasses it, and so like I'm a big fan of what it's doing. So I love Final Fantasy 6. I especially love the second half of Final Fantasy 6. I think a lot of people are like, they argue about which half is better. Like the first half is so well paced, the second half is very different, which we won't talk about until next time. But I'm a big fan of what it's doing. So yeah, I mean, we were coming with all different kinds of experiences to this game, and I think it's great. But I also think that we can all agree the opening hour and a half of this game is fantastic. Or maybe you won't, Ben. I don't know.
I will say
But
I'm sort of upset that the new Pixel remasters does not have the glorious 3D animations they had for the PlayStation version.
oh yeah, I forgot about that because I played this in the PlayStation version,
Yeah.
and I totally forgot that was a thing.
I was sort of like going, "Are they gonna have it? Are they gonna? Oh,
I think
you
those
still
were
get
just
Biggs
in
and
the
Wedge."
PlayStation version.
Yeah, I think
Yeah,
so.
Wait,
I
I
mean,
never played the PlayStation version. What exactly were those again?
they made CGI mini movies for certain parts of the game, and so you got a little extra context of Kefka and Terra at the very beginning of the game. That whole idea of her having the slave crown
Hmm.
is actually, you get to see her and a close up of her face in a relatively advanced CG model for the time. And you actually get to see the crown on her head. So you suddenly go, oh, that's what that was. And since you can't really necessarily see it in the glorious joys of tiny little pixels on a CRT screen, it helps give a little extra detail into the game.
I can't remember. Is that something you see before the game actually starts proper?
Yes.
Okay. It's
You
actually
see that
interesting.
before you see Biggs and Wedge and Terra.
It's been a long time since I've played the game, but I actually don't know that I like that. Because like I think that part of what makes the beginning of this game so powerful is that like we are, so for context, everybody who's listening. So like this game is about um a lot of things, but essentially there is an empire that is trying to control the world through the use of what's called magitech. And the reason, and magitech is mostly like machine driven magic for the most part, where they have harvested magic from a variety of sources that we'll talk about, and they are sort of infusing them into machines to sort of take over the world is sort of the impression that we're given. And as you're going through the game, you play as, at least at the beginning, you play as someone who has magic infused in them, Terra, and we don't know why. But the first half of the game in particular is really like the classic, like evil empire against like the small person. But the way the game opens is that you have Terra and two other people, Biggs and Wedge, and I believe this is the introduction, if I'm not mistaken, of Biggs and Wedge, like the named characters. Um, who are invading a town called Narsh, who are trying to get their hands on what's called an Esper, which in Final Fantasy parlance is basically a summon. But we don't know why. We just know that they're there. We know that they're trying to get to it, and they are using these machines called Magitech that they are kind of writing to have the ability to overtake these people. But like we're not given any context when the game starts. Like it's like we're just there. We're in there, and it almost seems like from the very beginning that we are the bad guy. And I think that's amazing. Like I think it's fascinating. Like this idea that they are placing us in the space of like the capitalist bad guy almost from the off. And as you're going through it and you're killing people with Terra, and then eventually you hit the Esper, and Terra sort of realizes that maybe she's being controlled. Like we don't know that as the player, and I think that's kind of cool. What does everybody else think about the opening of this game?
Oh, I think it's just yeah, the idea that we're not really totally understanding what's going on is a really interesting point to make, because I mean at the same time, like, Terra doesn't know what's going on. She's very much like being controlled, and we're being like introduced to this character and kind of like literally put into the shoes of this character. And like what we're doing clearly seems vaguely bad. Like we're in these pretty scary looking machines. We're killing citizens and dogs with giant lasers, and
I've played The Last of Us Part 2. I'm familiar with killing dogs, okay?
yeah, Final Fantasy VI did it first. Look
I
at
know,
that.
right?
And yeah, like it seemed like it's clearly like alluding to the fact that we're the baddies here, but it's not like completely clear. And like even thinking back to when I was like first playing it, I didn't really like understand the context, and like even returning to it now, like yeah, that's like almost, it seems like a purposeful decision that adds a lot to the narrative intrigue of the beginning.
It's also an interesting parallel, I think, because you end up thinking, you realize that Terra is not completely innocent for all that she is ignorant of, and none of the characters, you sort of get the feeling, are completely innocent. There's
Mm.
they've got their flaws for a variety of reasons, and it's a really nice setup to sort of introduce the fact that you can still be somebody who's good even if you have a flawed background.
Yeah, I was going to say I had never really considered that from that context perspective, but the fact that you go like you're presented as the bad guys right off the bat, but then you like the first other character you're introduced to is Locke, who in the introduction especially you're like told he's a thief, and that
Right.
you're vaguely told, well, maybe we can use Terra. So I guess they kind of keep it vague as far as who the good guys are. I mean, because you get to name him, but
Oh, trust me, I got very close to naming Locky Dippy.
I think it's interesting that you bring that up too, because like at the time, like this is a person who's played RPGs a long time, even before this game came out. Like that wasn't something that we really engaged with.
Mhm.
This idea of morally gray characters, and I don't think that most of the characters in this game are really morally gray. Like they're
No,
presented as like vaguely morally gray, like maybe Shadow, but like for the most part, like we know they're good people. But like it presents characters as they are, and it's like the beginning of like RPGs maturing as a storytelling medium. And
mhm.
I think that's really important. And I don't think I've ever really thought about it that way before.
Yeah, uh, I think definitely like the first thing that I noticed was that the characters are named Biggs and Wedge, and I was like, oh, this is like Star Wars. It's just the Star Wars reference like immediately hit me, and I'm like, okay, so there's the Empire, and they're bad, and then as soon as Locke gets introduced, I'm like, oh, he's like Han Solo or whatever, and these are the rebels, and okay. I think I do agree that the choice to have the player begin and kind of be like in the role of the villain is an interesting one. And I didn't really know a lot about the intro going in, so I was like, okay, we're like some people and we're walking, along the snowy plain or whatever to this town, and it's not really very clear what's like truly going on. And so I think that was kind of an interesting choice. I do think it's kind of like almost a pretty quickly undercut though, because like Biggs or one of them mentions that she has a slave crown or on like in that section, like once you've gone through a little bit of the town. And so I think from that point you're like, oh well, they're definitely like bad. They put a like a slave
That's
device on
true.
this
That's
woman.
true.
They're
It
probably
is
evil.
literally called a slave crown. Yeah.
I
Yeah.
guess that's probably bad.
Yeah, so but I do think you're right at like that very opening scene where they approach Narsh and then you're fighting people. And even I think the design of the soldiers or warriors that you fight in Narsh is kind of ambiguous. They kind of have a design that might look like a typical like RPG enemy.
Oh,
And
that's
so
true.
it's not really, I do think they keep that ambiguity for a little bit, but it gets almost immediately like I feel
Like
like
it's cold
undercut.
here, so that's why they look like that.
Yeah, I mean, and that makes sense. Like it makes
Yeah.
sense for sure. It's just like when you have no context for what the world is, I do think that is like effective. But as soon as Locke is introduced, and as soon as they start talking about the slave crown and going after the Esper, it's you know, it's like, oh, okay, I know what's happening here. But I did one thing I do think is interesting is you can see how like Breath of Fire 3 takes like a ton from this opening. It's like a very similar
Oh my goodness, I have
opening.
never thought about that before.
Yeah,
Yep.
it's like almost beat for beat. Like I mean, not exactly, but it's very similar. Which I found to be pretty interesting. So it's kind of cool to see where they some of the other games that I have played that came after have referenced the start of the
Yeah.
game.
Yeah, towards your point where like it's almost like easy to mistake the Narsh citizens for bad people. I feel like that's like very much reflected in just like how it's presented. Like when
Hmm.
like they attack us and we go into the actual combat screen, they're not like represented like the party members where they just have like their sprites like facing sideways. They have like that kind of more elaborate design that like only like the bad monsters have. Like I feel like if they made it that like you're literally fighting like the little pixelated sprites, then that would kind of give off more of the vibe that they might
Why
be
is
good,
why
but
is
like
everybody
they're
so
kind of
tall?
coded as monsters through the
Hmm.
illustration.
Yeah, and you really only see like these guys who are clearly like outfitted as warriors with like attack dogs and and stuff. So it's not, it would be really different if they were like civilians and they're maybe
Hmm.
trying to run away or something. So, but I think what they did was good if they, as far as trying to keep that ambiguity. So,
Yeah, I mean, I think that's an interesting point. I've never thought about it before. Um, when I think about the opening, I always just think about like the Magitech walking through the snow forward, as like a version of Terra's theme plays over it. And I think it's just like beautiful, and it gets to like that tone this game sets, and I think it is really fascinating. What's interesting is that, like, I feel like the tone the game sets in that opener does not really get paid off until the second half of the game, because it feels like a very obvious like we're killing the Empire. So like as you guys mentioned, like um Terra is there, and then like Locke shows up, and we find out about the returners, and we find out about the Empire. We find out they're bad, and Terra's being controlled for the Empire, and Locke is a thief for the Empire, and or not the Empire, for the returners. um
He's a gentleman adventurer. Thank you very much.
Indeed he is. Indeed he is. And he helps Terra sort of move away, sort of with the notion that she is maybe going to be the thing that helps push against the Empire. Because the thing that I don't think we've mentioned that's important about Terra is that she can use magic without the Magitech. Um, and that sort of gives her an air of mystery. And that moves us sort of out of Narsh and then into Figaro, which is a kingdom sort of to the south of Narsh, which is hypothetically an ally of the Empire. We discover very quickly that that is not, in fact, the truth. But I always think that this section with Figaro is actually where the game sort of like creates its sense of humor to some degree. Because one of the things that I think is missing, and one of our very recent previous episodes thing I think it's missing about Lost Odyssey is its sense of humor. And whatever you'll say about Edgar, I think that it is it sets up like sort of this ridiculous dynamic of Edgar sort of being like this doofus king, ladies' man, but also is like a technological genius. And I feel like Final Fantasy really did that really well in its early years.
Well, he's a ladies' man. He's a ladies' man, but nobody actually takes him seriously.
Exactly. And I think that's really interesting. And I think this game does so well with like its tonal disparity. But yeah, I mean, we also get some combat at that point. I want to talk more about combat maybe later, but like, um, and also Kefka gets introduced at this point, right? Like where he's Anakin Skywalker and he hates sand. And Lucy made this joke in chat, like, it took me like a whole day to get it.
But it works really well with the idea
totally
that this is the Empire, just as we were talking about it being like Star Wars. He's the Anakin Skywalker of this empire, and he hates.
Except for nobody ever smacks him down. Yeah. So, what do you guys think of like this whole Figaro introduction, beginning of the combat? What do you guys think about that? And also Kefka's introduction.
Yeah, so Zach, you mentioned the change in tone and like the focus on humor that the game has, and that was something that, having not a lot of knowledge, just maybe the major points of Final Fantasy VI going in, that I was really surprised by is how much humor is in this game. Like it's it's a very silly game. Like for a lot of its runtime, especially in this first half, like you mentioned Edgar being a doofus, but I kind of think like every male character in this game is a bit of a doofus, which isn't necessarily bad. Like there's a lot of really funny moments that come from that, and the game really does a good job of like giving a lot of the male characters like these really goofy, kind of self-deprecating moments, and that really does start with like Edgar and Figaro. So yeah, it's just something that I was really like surprised by going in because I didn't expect it.
Yeah, I definitely agree with that. And you know, when I think back to this game, I always think about like kind of like it's more nuanced narrative, it's more developed characters and things like that. But at the same time that it's doing these things, it's also, yeah, just kind of being like really silly and presenting us these ridiculous situations. Like even when we have to kind of protect Terra from getting recaptured by the Empire when we're still in Narsh, like we end up teaming up with all these fluffy little Moogle creatures and have like a Moogle army and battle against
I love
the
that this was
Empire like
America's introduction to the Moogles at
Yeah.
the time. Like we didn't know what they were. Well, like what the heck is this? Exactly.
Yeah, and they
I think it's
clearly
excellent.
got like a really decked out army because all of them have like different weapons and things too. It's just like it's really funny.
Which
and,
you can take from them too.
Wait, really?
Yes.
Only
you
mods.
just unequip them at the end of that segment?
I steal from
right
Moogles
before.
regularly.
Oh my god. I did not know this. That's
it's
awesome.
just Mog, but it's awesome. And you get a spear way earlier than you're supposed to if you take it from him.
And then you could give it to Edgar. Nice.
So
Learning
it's also
more about this game every day.
This is the other interesting thing is by Figaro, you figured out that every single character in this game has a different form of gameplay.
That's true. We can talk about that now. I mean, like I think that later in the game, you eventually get like espers, and the espers will give you the ability to use magic. And we'll get to like what they are story wise later. But I think that one of the things that I think is interesting about this game is that it gives every character like the ability to use one extra ability. So, for example, with Edgar, it's his tools, so he gets to use a chainsaw. We haven't talked about Sabin yet, but that's Edgar's brother, and he gets to use a blitz, which in the original version, like you had to like very carefully put in a certain almost like fighting game technique to get him to do the thing. Whereas now it's like literally
It's
just like
spelled out for you now, which is
spelled out,
I'm so
which
thankful
I
for.
actually don't like at all. I'm like, look,
Yeah,
in my
I'm
fighting games, that's not
disappointed in
spelled
that.
out for me.
Let me do a Hadouken, damn it.
Right, exactly. I don't like it at all. I think it makes the game too easy, which we'll talk about. But it, it gives you an ability, but it also gives you magic on top of that. But it also gives like different stats. Like I feel like when they get to Final Fantasy VII, like it's like, oh, every character does the exact same thing over and over again. The answer is cast this spell, mimic it, do Knights of the Round 17 times in a row, you win against Super Boss. Whereas here, you get all these abilities. And I feel like in the world of balance, and there are lots of things I prefer about the second half of the game, but in this half of the game, I feel like they do a great job of balancing the combat around the abilities that are specific to the character with the abilities that the character can also learn. So I think that's awesome.
At the beginning of the game, magic is what makes Terra special. But once you gain the ability for other characters to use magic, they give Terra another ability at that point as well. So she now has a little bit more that she can do.
Then she becomes the most epic character by far.
Yes.
Yes.
Yeah, and it's very appropriate that her ability just makes her magic better, because like she's the one that had it to begin with, right? But I feel like
Exactly.
I'm gonna keep coming back to this, but like just like the fact that these little character unique moves are like just tied to their characterization and tell us more about them. I feel like that's another thing that really stuck out to me about like how much this game, especially for its time, but even today, like managed to make all these characters feel like individuals with their own history. And you know, Locke can protest that he's a treasure hunter and adventurer all he wants, but that move is steal. His character move is steal, so we know he's been doing some thieving.
He's the only one who could use the thief's bracer relic. So it's sort of like, dude, you can protest as much as you want, but
the thief doth protest too much, methinks.
That merchant's clothing was clearly treasure.
Oh god, the merchant, the merchant's clothing. That was one of the annoying bugs of the original game that pissed me off so much, and why I love Locke now, but I have had a complicated history with him because in the original SNES and PlayStation games, when you switched to the thief's clothing, he dropped everything. He was nude except for the merchant's clothing. So you'd go into a fight and you'd be like, "Oh wait, you wouldn't have any of his equipment, anything equipped, and you'd have to go back and put it back on every single time he changed into a different outfit."
Right. Yeah, that's definitely a good change. A lot of like, I don't agree with all the changes they made, but a lot of them definitely support the experience nicely.
Well, and the other big change is that for the original PlayStation and SNES version, evade didn't work. Evade, you could up the stat as much as you wanted, but it wouldn't do anything. Which
like
made
magic evasion,
yeah,
Right.
no, evasion or magic evasion didn't work. So it made any of those items completely useless, and it made characters like Locke, who were supposed to have a relatively high evasion, not as preferable in certain situations.
True.
Yeah, the blind status, which is also tied to evasion, completely didn't work in the original.
Yep.
Yeah, I wish it didn't work in the Pixel remaster either, because it's definitely made things more difficult for me more often than I'd like.
Just gotta buy some silver goggles.
I know.
I
just
still
don't want
like
to.
that they didn't fix the fact that if a character gets flipped the other way, he looks like they're wearing sunglasses on the back of their head because it doesn't fit with them.
Right.
It's a fashion statement, okay?
Yes.
Ben, what do you think about the combat as a person who's sort of new to this?
Yeah, so I will preface this by saying that I am not a fan of the traditional like mainline Final Fantasy like ATB system. I think that it doesn't really offer much advantages or improvements over like a pure turn-based system. and for me personally, I just find it kind of like annoying. So and that's like that's kind of a personal thing, but and there's some ATB systems that are good, but I these kind of games, and even Final Fantasy V to a degree, they just don't like I don't think they make the most of like the concept really. So that's a thing for me. I think the game would probably be more fun if it was just like turn based, but like pure turn based and not the active ATB part. But other than that, I found the game like very like mechanically shallow, in a way that I just doesn't really appeal to me in terms of the combat. Not that like I think it's true. Like you guys are all talking about how the unique skills that each character have give them like their own kind of feel and personality, and I think that's very true. But I don't find the game to be very well balanced around those skills. Like, especially like Sabin in particular, he kind of just like breaks the game. Like he's so
No, I agree.
strong, and he can just destroy everything. Terra's magic is really strong even before she gets the trance ability.
Mhm.
Even like Edgar's like abilities are all pretty strong. And there's never like, at least at this point I'm at in the game now, there's never been a point where I really felt like I needed to like plan or strategize or really
Mhm.
think about what I was doing too much in combat. And for me, that's like a big
Mhm.
negative of the game, I think.
I think
It's
that's
actually
fair.
really
Like,
fair.
yeah,
I agree.
like this has never been like the most balanced game. I know they tried to balance some things out for the Pixel remaster, and I think they did a decent job at it. But yeah, despite like all of my love for Final Fantasy VI, like the actual like mechanics, how they interact with each other, like it doesn't feel like the most balanced game. You can auto crossbow your way through the first few hours of the game, no
Yep.
problem,
That's the
without paying
truth.
attention to anything else. But I will say about like the ATB, I have never enjoyed ATB so much as playing this game on very fast. I turned up the battle speed just because I'm like I've played this game like so many times. Like let's make it interesting, and like flipping through my menus, especially once I get magic and just have more like options to flip through, and trying to like get the right thing selected before I just get like blasted by like countless enemy attacks. Like that turned menu navigation into like Devil May Cry level excitement almost.
Yeah, I mean, I think that your criticism is totally fair, Ben. Like I love this game, but like as I'm playing through it, like and I was complaining to my partner early on, like I was like, oh my gosh, they somehow managed to make this game even easier, and this game is already really easy to begin with.
Mhm.
Um, but I think that I guess for me, like even though like the combat is really easy, like when I was a kid, like I found some of these areas really difficult, which we'll get to in a second here. But like now, like the notion that like when you split and like you're trying to fight Kefka in Narsh, like that is like not a challenging portion even slightly. But I think that I appreciate that they tried, and also like RPGs at the time were either like insanely easy or like stupidly hard. Like, I don't know, Seventh Saga, for example, as being like stupidly hard. But yeah, I mean, like I think that and like kind of like skipping ahead here, like so like we're with Tara, we're with Edgar, and then eventually I think this moment is awesome. Like that they have Figaro like literally go under the sand to avoid Kefka. And then like they're able to then escape down south to then go basically like try to get to the returner hangout, but also like recruit Sabin. And we're also introduced to Kefka here, which I think is like an interesting. We've seen him in a cutscene very briefly before, but like we also are introduced to him in a cutscene where he talks about how much he hates sand being on his boots, and he forces one of his underlings to clean it off. And like those of you who haven't played Final Fantasy VI, Kefka is a general for the Empire, and he is really the big bad of this game. He's certainly the most famous character from this game. And I think it's interesting, but then we go get Sabin, and Sabin in combat is really interesting, but also Kefka is really interesting. So like in terms of that sequence, like we're talking about like Figaro disappearing through that cave, through meeting Sabin, who then has to fight his master's son. What are some things that stick out to you guys about that?
Yeah, so I found that section, like the part where the castle goes in under the sand, or and they jump off the castle and land on the chocobos or whatever is like really cool. And then the castle goes under the sand, like that's all really neat. I found the like part where they're on the mountain and they're trying to go get Sabin like very strange. Like you're kind of told, oh, there's this guy who's his name's Duncan, is that right? The master?
Yeah, Duncan
Yeah.
the
Yep.
Master.
Yeah, they're like, so people are talking about Duncan the Master in the town, and then you go to there, and then you like quickly find out that he's like dead, and you're like, okay, and then you're like going through, and there's like somebody following you, and is the person following you, that's the son, right? Is that
Yeah,
right?
it's the
Yeah.
son, Duncan's son,
Yeah.
and I have to admit this part of the game felt really rushed to me.
Yes,
Yeah.
yes, absolutely. Yeah, like I'm like, okay, I don't really have any context for who Duncan is, and then I guess it like you get, I mean, you figure, okay, it's Saban's teacher, right? And but there's no, it's just so odd. I'm like, am I supposed to
You
care
get
about this guy being
you
dead? I
get
don't even
you
know.
get more about Saban's love of tea
Yeah,
exploring his house than you do about Duncan and his whole mastery aspect. And it's sort of like it really felt tacked on and really rushed.
yes,
And you're sort of just like, why do I care about this dude? Okay, let me just beat him and get it over with. But it's not it
yeah, yeah. I feel like Saban could have just been on the mountain like meditating, and it would have the same like effect on the narrative and his
yeah.
character. Like yeah.
Yeah, I think one of the things that it kind of does throughout, and this is a good example of that, is they do have a lot of these moments where it tries to like foreshadow things. Like it does talk about Duncan in town, or it does talk about Sabin when you're back at the castle, and they talk about like Sabin and Edgar's relationship. But some of those are hidden. Like you, if you didn't talk to the right person, you're just going to completely miss a piece. And or later on, like if you don't take the right characters to the right towns at the right time, like you don't get the conversations or flashbacks or dream sequences.
Hmm.
I do think that is kind of an interesting aspect of the game, and kind of like especially when you're heading to like Zozo as your destination when you're going for Sarah or Terra, sorry. And yeah, you can like miss a couple things. There's some scenes that are only available with like Locke and Edgar. There's one that's like uh sorry, Edgar and Sabin, and then there's one that's like with Locke, and that you get like a little bit more interaction with Celeste. I think it adds to the replay value and just like has like more secrets,
Hmm.
like narrative secrets, kind of. I think that's a neat idea, and especially because this is a game where there is supposedly no like real main character, so kind of incentivizes you to try out different party compositions in a way. But I definitely agree that I think the passage from like when you get out of Figaro to when you recruit Sabin is easily the weakest portion of the world of balance.
Yeah, I mean, I don't disagree with that. But I do think that leads us to what I think is one of the things that makes the game most unique, which is where we get to the returner hideout, and then you meet the returner hideout lead, Bannon. And he's like, "Hey, you should join us." And you're supposed to say no, because then you can go get the Genji glove, which is one of the most powerful accessories in the first half of the game. Which I think that like one of the things I like about this game is that like it hides some of its lore in like you talking to people around town. It's not like previous RPGs, really, where it's like if you want to know how to progress, you better talk to everybody. That is not true here, but it is like if you want to get all the good stuff, you have to do like some weird stuff. Um Like
But
it feels like
I
it's
would
playing around. Go ahead. I'm sorry.
I would no. I would just point out that if you're playing from another perspective, where you're not necessarily going for the best stuff first, but you're going for a completionist, because this game does have a bestiary and a way of getting a completionist of like getting all this possible items in the game. If you say yes first, you get the gauntlet, which you can only get in one of two places in this
Mm-hmm.
game, and both are completely missable.
Mm-hmm. That's true.
So it's one of these like, yes, the Genji glove is far superior, but at the same time, you've got to make this choice. Okay, do you want to make this easy, or do you want to, go for a completionist? And you're sort of like,
Yeah.
mm.
I mean, I think the game design is really interesting on that front. Like it feels like it rewards replaying in a way that games nowadays don't. Like it's like you have to just play through the game as it is and like explore everything and see everything in a way that we don't nowadays. I think that's really interesting. But I think the most interesting thing here is the split. So like when you get to the returner hideout, eventually Tara will agree to join the returners, and then you go plop down onto a river to like go float towards Narsh or wherever the heck you're supposed to actually go. I can't remember. um and
At that point, they're just
event
trying to escape.
Yeah, exactly. And you eventually face Ultros, who is a classic Final Fantasy villain. He's delightful. You get split into 3 different sort of scenarios. Like it's like, hey, you can play as Sabin over here. You can play as Terra over here. You can play as Locke. Boo, that scenario sucks. Over here. And so like I feel like that is, at the time, it felt like such a unique way of playing RPGs. But like I guess I'm curious, like which one of these scenarios was your favorite?
Oh, hands down, it's. Gonna say hands down, the Phantom Forest. That's
Yes,
my favorite.
yes. Sabin, Sabin.
You get to suplex a train, for God's sake.
And you get to help a new companion go through some trauma.
Yeah, I find it interesting they let you pick between the 3 paths because they're really like not equivalent at all. Like it's not really 3 paths. It's like 2 people do like two groups do like one thing, and then you spend like 3 or 4 hours with Sabin. Which is interesting. I mean, I think it's cool to show them from different perspectives and like what they're doing. But it just, it just so happens that what Sabin's doing is like a lot more, and obviously like the most interesting because of that. But yeah, it's just like I expected when there was that choice, like, oh, these are going to be like, they're going to be like equivalent in length and like the same, have a lot, each have a lot to them. And I was really surprised by the fact that only 2 of them, or only one of them was really like significantly lengthy, and the other 2 were very short.
And you do get a bunch of new characters, but Sabin's, you get 2 new characters. You get Cyan, and you get Gao,
Mm-hmm.
who is one of the characters. My first playthrough, I just didn't do anything with. I didn't really understand the mechanics behind him. I got frustrated with the Velt because you fight all these monsters and you don't get any experience out of it. So as a first time player, it's sort of like, this doesn't. I feel like I'm not getting rewarded. And this time around, I spent a lot more time with Gao, and he, by the floating continent, was by far my strongest character because he
Did you
can
get the
learn all.
stray cat?
I got the stray
If you got
cat.
the stray cat, then he's the most broken character in the game for at least the
Yeah,
first
you're set.
2/3.
The
Yup.
stray cat, Chimera, and the Intangier. Um, just basically, yeah, they completely break the game.
Yep.
Up until the floating
The
continent,
game's
when
easy enough as it is, but oh
yeah,
my.
it just, and the lesser Lopros, um, with its fireball, just basically raining
Yep.
fire down on all your enemies. Yes.
And turning Gao into a magic tech armor is pretty awesome too. Just shooting lasers out of
Yeah.
his little body.
Gao has always been my least favorite character. He is always the one I put on the bench. I totally agree, he's really good, but I don't understand why he's there or what he adds to the game or the story at all.
You know what, Lucas? I agree. I never like, despite Gao's brokenness, I'll never put him in my party just because like he feels so narratively insignificant. Like I just can't get with it, you know?
Yeah, I did appreciate him like messing with Saban at the when they're in the cave and like trying to like what is he like does he like try to put he takes his like money and like throws it in the pit or
It's
whatever.
so good.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that
Yeah.
was good.
That's
That
so
was
Final
good.
Fantasy VI.
Yes, it's very funny. And when that happened, I was like, "What is going on?" Like, I was so like surprised. Even though the game had a lot of like silly moments up until that point, I was still like, "Did that really just happen? Like, this kid is just pranking him." But yeah, that he's definitely funny. He's definitely like a really funny comedic kind of character. So I feel like he's worth it just for that aspect of him.
Mr. Thou.
Oh yeah,
Um,
yeah, that part's funny too.
Yeah, it's really funny when Mr. Thou's whole town. I'm just kidding.
Well, yeah, that's true.
no.
We didn't really
Mr.
talk
Thou
about
is
Cyan.
Thou is Saban. It's Cyan is just um Cyan. Gao calls Saban Mr. Thou,
Oh, that's right.
which
Yeah.
Yeah.
which up until that point Saban was sort of the very like I'll take anything that comes my way, and then he gets pissed off about this, and it's sort of just like there's your the start of your chink in the armor, because everybody in this game delightfully has their moment of being the straight man to somebody else's joke.
That's a really good way of putting it. Like everybody has their opportunity, and I think it's actually one of the things that makes this game work so well. Like that, like everybody has the opportunity to be the straight man to someone else's joke, and like everybody is going to be the butt of someone else's joke. And I think it's part of what makes this very quick narrative, especially in the first half, mostly work. But like I want to very quickly, I don't want to talk too long about like these split paths, because Lox is like, hey, go dress like this other person and go dress like this other person, and it's like so boring and bad. um and like Terra's is very simple and short, but like I think that the moment that we recruit Cyan or Cayenne or however you want to pronounce it, I don't care. Um, the moment at Doma, where Kefka, who is a phenomenal villain, like a phenomenal villain, poisons the river to Doma, and like the level of evil that is, and also the fact that other members of the Empire don't agree with it, like gets to like this like small moment of like, hey, maybe there are like it's not just good and evil, which is definitely not something that Final Fantasy had done previously, but also like the level of evil that Kefka is so fascinating, and I think he is a fantastic villain.
Agreed. That is the moment that makes Kefka as bad as he is. Like, he does a lot of bad things, but to me, Doma and that moment with Cyan running to go try and see his family to try and save them is one of the most heartbreaking moments, and the one that really makes you hate Kefka.
Yeah, and the
As
fact that he's just deriving pure pleasure from it, and you get that like 16-bit laughter going on, like
If they ever HD 2D this game, they better keep that.
yeah, it's just such a brilliant soundbite, just haunting, especially when playing in such a tragic moment.
Well, and it also plays into the Phantom Forest when you're on the train. You're given, you're working towards trying to stop the train, and you sort of think, well, if I stop the train, does that save everybody? And then you still get that moment where you see the entirety of Doma get on that train, and there's no stopping it, and it keeps
Yeah.
going, and you're left behind.
Yeah.
It really hints to like how awful and how horrible Kefka truly is,
Mhm.
that he thinks that this all is a game, and he's giggling and laughing as people are dying in front of him.
Yeah, and for all the game's silliness, like just that moment where the ghost train departs with all the domans, and you're kind of just put back in the shoes of Sabin, and Cyan's just kind of standing there at the edge, like just with his head bowed, and if you talk to him, he doesn't say anything. you talk to Shadow, he says like just best leave him alone. And it's just like this incredibly poetic and contemplative moment that you can just kind of sit with until you're ready to leave. And I think just having that little micro interaction in there for the player's part is just like a brilliant little thing of narrative design that just encompasses so much of what makes this game so interesting to me.
Yeah, and one thing I like, you guys are talking about like Kefka and his like effectiveness as a villain. One thing I like about the portrayal of Kefka is that he's like very much like a coward and like kind of a sniveling little weasel of a man. Like he's very maybe he's not the most like, you know, complicated or morally gray character, but they did a really good job of like a guy who has some power and just like gets the most obscene pleasure out of lording that
Mhm.
power over other
Yeah.
people. And like and I feel like that is like pretty accurate to, you know, the kinds of people who misuse their power in real life.
Yeah.
And so
Elon Musk
that's
would love Kefka.
yeah. Yeah.
I don't even care if you like Elon Musk. Stop listening. Continue.
Oh,
Yeah,
I
he'd
will
have a
say-
Twitter Spaces about like how Kefka is really the good guy or whatever.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, he invented Tesla, so he's
Yeah.
fine.
But yeah, he's just very like it's almost like it makes me think of Suikoden 2, and you have
Yes.
yes, who is very, I think, clearly like a character kind of patterned after Kefka. But I prefer Kefka's portrayal because there is a bit of like you could see and got his name is like escaping me at the moment of the villain in
Luca
Suikoden
Luca
2.
Blight.
Luca Blight, yes, thank you. Like you could almost see him as like intimidating, and maybe some people would see him as like maybe impressive because he's so like of an opposing force, and he's so strong, and like even though he's like crazy and evil and stuff, people might get some kind of warped sense of admiration for aspects of him. But with Kefka, there's really nothing to admire. He's so just like pathetic and gross. And that's something I appreciate about the portrayal for sure.
Yeah, and it's interesting even picking up on some of the flavor text you can get, especially when you're like in and around the Empire and you get a chance to talk to like some of the guards. That like they all just like hate Kefka.
Mhm.
Like despite like Kefka very much just being on their side, being their general, their superior and leading them, like nobody likes him personally. They all just think he's like kind of weird and they don't really want anything to do with him. And then you also like despite Kefka's fairly one-dimensional portrayal, you also find out that he's been like experimented on. Like he was the first like Magitech Knight that Sid helped
Yeah.
create, and
That's what caused him to go
he's just
mad.
like he's just like this failed experiment that doesn't excuse like any of the things he's done, but it's just like, oh my god, like this creation, like this isn't just like a creation by like an individual. This is like a creation by like a screwed up system.
And he makes a really interesting foil then for Celeste,
Mhm.
because Celeste was very much the same thing. And Celeste, you know, took her job. It took the burden and the pain and the horror of being a Magitech Knight and try to do good with it, even as being a general for the Empire. And Kefka just leaned into, well, they did this to me, so I can do whatever I want.
I do think it's interesting that despite how much everybody hates him, despite how much everybody else trashes him, the Emperor keeps letting him do what he wants. Like, even going so far as to like let him out later and like go along with his plan, like betraying you basically. Clearly Kefka is at least manipulative enough to be on his good side or has something over him, or I'm not sure.
I
That-
think, and I'll use a chocobo here. I think that the Emperor views Kefka as his get done guy.
Yeah.
Like he has no moral qualms, even outside of the Emperor, which we'll talk about, I guess, towards the end here. But like, he like I don't want to get too political here, but in the same way that like any dictator will find somebody who can say like, "Hey, go do my thing and go get it done." And I think that makes like Kefka more pathetic at the beginning. Like I think a lot of times we forget that he's a general, but he is. Like he is a person who has power, even though he's ridiculous and wants sand wiped off his shoe. And I think that makes him like seem more pathetic to us, but it also is what allows him to sort of worm his way into being like the big bad of this game.
Yeah, it's like the Emperor is just kind of using him to like do his most like dirty deeds, and like clearly like Kefka's like a little crazy from those experiments, and so he's just really just being like exploited by the Emperor, and it really makes when we get to that point of the game where it seems like the Emperor is willing to make good, I guess just like keeping around Kefka. I mean, I guess he does lock up Kefka, and that's kind of like supposed to be like a show of him like kind of trying to
Yeah.
take this more morally superior road. So that's a really interesting detail to put in there.
Yeah.
But yeah, ultimately, like he's just using Kefka as a tool. But like towards the end of the World of Balance section, like I mean, jokes on him. Kefka has his own thoughts going on.
Hmm.
Well, and it's an interesting sort of you've got these two very different generals. You've got General Leo, who all of the soldiers really look up to and really support, who's still doing what the Empire says, and then you've got Kefka.
Hmm.
And so you that helps when you get to that um part of the game where you've got the Empire and you're sort of going, should we be trusting this guy? And you have to go, well, he did lock up Kefka and he's got General Leo. Maybe he is being able to turn over a leaf. And the first playthrough of this game, when you get to that point, you really have this uncertainty
Mm-hmm.
because of those two diametrically opposed generals on either side of him.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I think Leo too serves like an interesting role in showing the player, like even though Kefka is like really ridiculous and kind of weird, that he's like clearly the most effective, because you kind of like they show you the initial siege and like Cyan just like destroying the enemy captain or whatever, right? And you kind of get the feeling that this siege has been going on like a long time, and this has happened like multiple times. And then, of course, when Kefka comes and is able to take over, he immediately solves the problem in the most horrible way possible. But he's clearly very effective because he has no like moral qualms. And so, like, I feel like that moment's really like shows you why he has the position that he has, even if he's so contemptible otherwise.
Yeah, I mean, I think that gets to and we're gonna fast forward a little bit here because we're running a little bit long on time. But I think it gets to the way this whole game is set up, right? Like it's like Kefka is like this diametric force that sort of exists on the Empire, but you have all these characters who are involved in the Empire to some degree. And at this point, I think we have 12 or 13 main characters. And so, like, even though Terra, I think, especially in the World of Balance, is especially meant to be our our protagonist. Like at the end of that split, we realize that she is half Esper, and you get this like beautiful flashback. Maybe it's a little bit later where you like meet Terra's parents and you realize that she is in fact an Esper, where all the magic of this world is coming from and the Empire is trying to steal it from them. And so I think that this game does such a good job of creating all these different dynamics, and I think it actually gets way stronger in the second half. But I think in the first half, the place where the dynamics in this game are strongest, just to kind of hone in on a famous moment for a second here, is the Opera House, where
Hmm.
like when we're trying to get to Vector, we realize, hey, like we need to go to the Empire, we need to deal with this and get to the Espers because like we've met an Esper We realize they're not dealing with it correctly, and we need to deal with it in a different way. We needed to travel there, and in order to get there, we need an airship. And the only person in this entire world who owns an airship is this dude named Setzer, who is obsessed with this girl who is an opera singer, and he's trying to kidnap her during the opera house scene because she's an opera singer.
Maria.
Yeah. And so then we get into
Draco.
what I think is maybe the most unique sequence of this whole game, at least now. I think the World of Ruin was more unique back in '94 when this game came out. Where you have Celeste impersonating someone because she looks like Maria. And in the Pixel Remaster version, which I think we're all playing, it goes like HD 2D, and it's so cool. And you know what? I don't care about actual opera singers. I wanted my bleeps and bloops back. I switched this back to the original soundtrack on my Switch version, and it still gave me the original, like the actual operatic soundtrack. I didn't have my bleeps and boops. I am offended by
Really?
this.
Even the original soundtrack.
Yeah, I tried. I was like, I was on the phone with my partner at the time. Like, I want my bleeps and bloops because my grandmother, who passed recently, loved those, and I was like, I need it the way that my grandmother loved it, and they wouldn't give it to me. And that's why I am never going to play the Pixel Remaster version again. But in all sincerity, like, what did you guys think of the opera sequence? I want to talk about that before we kind of rush our way through the end of this first half.
Well, I do love the fact that that was where my Pixel Remaster decided to glitch, and instead of a castle, I was getting lots of little pixel.
It was so
little.
good. I've seen the pictures; they're so good.
Pictures of Celeste in various poses, and I'm just going, wait, which one's the real one? What's going on? And I couldn't stop, and then the game crashed. I managed to get a screenshot, which I shared, but it was just this like jarring moment. I'm like, what the heck? But and this is the first time in the Pixel Remaster we really get the like change the 3D aspect of it. That we're no longer dealing with a 2D castle. We're suddenly in a 3D area, and it was jarring for me, at the very least, having played the original.
Yeah, I got the same thing with the Switch error and having like 10 Celestes appear on my screen. I'm like, why is this opera suddenly turned into a disco? What's going on? And yeah, that was definitely a buzzkill. So PSA to anybody who's thinking of picking up Pixel Remaster on Switch, like that might happen to you. Here it could happen on the floating continent again. But yeah, just so you know. But otherwise, opera scene is absolutely brilliant. Regarding the 3D modeling of the opera itself, I thought it looked beautiful. But correct me if I'm wrong. In the original, as when you the vision of Draco turns into flowers, didn't you actually have to pick them up and walk them up the balcony and drop them off?
That is
So
correct.
they just made that automated in the Pixel Remaster.
Indeed, they did.
I was a little
They made it into a
disappointed
quick time
about that
event.
one.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And they also actually changed the lyrics of the original song.
I mean,
They
that's a
added 2 more
translation
verses.
thing.
Yeah, it is a translation thing, but it was one of those things where like, wait, there's extra stuff here. What? Huh?
So
But
I don't mind the retranslation and the stuff that they've messed with the opera as much, mostly because the older, like, first of all, the GBA translation did it way worse. The Game Boy Advance version of this.
I wish we had time to talk about how much I miss the Wolseley translation here, but we don't. But yeah.
Yeah. I really feel like, even though it was different, and I definitely have my, my nostalgia place in my heart, the language in this felt like it was actually better. It fit the music better. And I do wish that you could change it. I didn't realize you couldn't change it to the away from the singers, but I did feel like at least this time the singers were, like, the way they presented it, I felt like was better than in some of the other versions where they have tried to do other stuff.
The story actually made sense this time around for the opera. But they did leave in one very interesting plot hole. At the end of the opera, Celeste and Setzer are on the airship, and they have the moment with her taking Edgar's two-sided coin. We're never explained why Celeste actually knows about that story and why and the two-sided coin. Because she's not in that sequence when we first learned about it.
Yeah. At that point, Sabin doesn't even know about it.
Yep.
Thought there
Oh,
was
wait,
one
is that-
line of dialogue that might have kind of hinted at why she had the coin. I thought I processed that, but I could be wrong.
Wait, so
I mean, she does go and take it from Edgar. She goes, "Hey,
Right,
can I borrow
yes,
this?"
yes, that's right.
But she doesn't explain why she knows about
Yeah,
it, which
yeah.
is one of those little quirks. I'm like, that has annoyed me for 15 years. God dang it!
You know, she saw the flashback. She was watching it with us.
She's not in that scene though.
No, I know.
Yeah.
I'm totally kidding.
Yeah, that is a really interesting thing though, because that is like a pretty affecting moment, like when it's showing the backstory of like Edgar and Sabin and him like doing that, like that they're he's always gonna choose to stay and be king and everything, or let Sabin go off on his own. So like that is, it's like really affecting. It's interesting for it to come back, but yeah, I totally didn't have any idea like how she would know that he had that at all. I was confused by that too.
And that's one of those little moments that you can also miss, because if you don't have Sabin in that party, you get mentions of it, but you don't get the full scene.
Oh.
No, I've played this game probably 20 times. I've never not had Sabin in my party.
That's
he's
fair.
so good.
Fair.
Especially when you know that his magic stat is the most important one to manipulate. We're not going to get into
Yes.
like the Esper manipulation of magic stat, but like that is the way to win this game, for the record. Yeah, I mean, like I think that like the opera sequence is even more powerful with the HD2D. I think it's really cool. I think it's really interesting that the developers decided to make this the sequence. Like, it's like, this is the moment that our game is famous for. Like, that, let us upgrade this. Like, because like Final Fantasy VI is an HD2D remaster would like absolutely sell like hotcakes, right? At least in this country, because apparently it's more popular over here than it is in Japan. It's
Anybody
really
you
interesting
ask
to me.
who's played this game, what the first thing that comes to their mind is always going to be the opera.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Does anybody have any ideas of the reason why they think that's the case?
So one of the things that definitely stand out about that sequence to me is like, so we've already been talking about how the game like doesn't quite have a main character. We're constantly like switching between these perspectives. I think it's even interesting to note how in like the opening Narsh sections of the game, and when we get like Edgar and whatnot, what character it puts in the lead of the party. Because when at the beginning we have Terra in the lead, when Locke meets up with Terra, Locke's in the lead. When we get Edgar, Edgar's in the lead. So it's like the game's encouraging us to like swap between these characters, and I think that comes into most fruition in the opera sequence when we're actually forced to like switch between the perspectives. So like we get the opening of the opera, and then we get put in Locke's shoes. We get a little bit of flavor dialogue from whichever two other companions we brought along. We have to like go down to visit Celeste in her her room where she's kind of getting ready. Then we actually have to like read the script for the opera. We actually have to try to memorize, even though we don't actually have to memorize that much. The game's pretty generous in that sense, because it doesn't want us. It doesn't. I don't think it wants us to screw up. It wants us to experience the opera, but it also wants us to kind of feel immersed in Celeste's moment. And then just like the whole plot just getting ridiculous with Ultros having to trying to sabotage it, us having a time limit to get to him. It's all just so brilliantly and uniquely structured, in a way that plays to the game's strengths of having like its multiple main characters, and then just like being able to combine this like really like emotionally poignant opera scene with just the pure ridiculousness of having an octopus trying to sabotage it and fighting him on stage. It's just, this is something that like a 16-bit JRPG can only give you in a lot of ways.
Yeah, I thought that part where where Ultros is like on the rafters and he's like, "Oh man, this is so heavy. It's gonna take me 4 minutes to push
Yeah,
this." Is so
Amazing.
funny. And then the timer starts. You're like, "Oh, okay, like literally 4 minutes. All right." It's just
the
such
most
a
part.
goofy thing.
It's the most poignant, and up until that point, one of the most poignant parts of the game, and the most Looney Tune-esque,
Yeah.
because it is literally a
Yeah.
2-ton weight that
Yeah.
he is trying to push off. You're just waiting for Acme to show up.
And for it to pull off both those things at the same time that well, like kudos to Final Fantasy VI.
I mean, the music in this game gets a lot of well-deserved praise, and like, I can't think of another game where they literally, I mean, the whole opera isn't even in here. He wrote an entire operetta, and this is like, what they could do with it with 16 bits at the time. It's incredible that anyone would actually take the time to do that.
Yeah,
Well,
the music I think is unquestionably, like, in my opinion, the strongest aspect of this game. Like, it is beautiful. Almost every piece is just really memorable and catchy, and um, just the whole time I was playing it, I was just always in awe of the music. And I think, obviously it's the pixel remaster version, so it's like, it's like more, it's orchestrated right and like remastered and everything. So it just is, I can't get, that's the one thing that I come away from this game being like, this is like 10 out of 10, amazing, is the music for sure.
it also amuses me that when OC Remix did their album of Final Fantasy VI music, which I absolutely adore, they have either 3 or 4 different versions of covering the opera, and some of them are played straight, and some of them, well, it's like the Bohemian Rhapsody of operas, and it is glorious. And the fact that they could do those 2 different versions and people are just like, "Yep, that makes complete sense," just really plays to the aspects of this game being both a goofball and just so poignant at the same time.
Yeah, I mean, I think that the music is such a critical part of why we still talk about this game. I feel like it drives so much of what we do, and the fact that like the world theme, when we just walk out of the town, and then we hear Terra's theme, and it's so epic, is amazing. And I also think like you pair that with the music of the opera, and even though it is like over the top and weird, and it was bleeps and bloops originally, which please give me the bleeps and bloops. um, I the fact that it also had power originally is also why this game is so powerful to people still today, right? Like it's stupid, but at the time it felt epic. Um, and I think that's a really important thing to note here.
Yeah, if anybody is interested in kind of learning more about the music behind the game, Boss Fight Books, I don't know if any of you are familiar with that series, but generally it brings in like a different author to write like a certain take on a video game, and the one on Final Fantasy VI is written by like a real composer, and touches on specifically the music of the game, and it's a fantastic read.
Yeah, I actually think
highly
we have a
recommend it.
review for that on the site.
Oh, right. Okay. Yeah.
So yeah, no, I think it's fantastic. So not to rush through the latter portions of the game, or like latter portions of this section, because we've gone through a lot of this already, but after we do that, we recruit Setzer, who is a womanizing airship driver instead of a womanizing king. I do think that Setzer and Edgar's characterization, at least at this point in the game, is maybe a little too similar. In this latter portions, oh man, his stuff with Daryl is fantastic, but we'll get to that. We decide that we need to go to the sealed gate to deal with the Espers. We release the Espers, and then the Emperor's like, "Hey, you release the Espers, and now they're destroying everything, and that's a problem." And we go meet with them, and there's like the dumbest mini game ever. We're not going to talk about it because it's dumb. I've decided on it right now, and we're also short on time.
But I want to just quickly mention,
Go ahead.
if I may, that one of the interesting things about Final Fantasy VI is like some of the Empire's like big bad moments are your fault. Like the whole reason they know that
Yeah.
Magicite is more stronger than the Espers themselves is because you're the one who discovers it and shows it to them, and you help open the sealed gate, which then leads to the Espers getting out and destroying towns, and then allows the Empire to make this next big step. And so it once again plays to the like, oh crap, am I the bad guy here? You're
No.
not, but it adds to
No.
it.
but like it's an interesting way of thinking about it, because like as I was playing this time, I remember thinking like, hey, maybe we shouldn't go to the gate. That seems like a bad idea. And then we did anyway, and yeah. So I think that you're onto something there. Like the ways in which like human fallacy leads to the mistakes. And I don't think this game is working on that thematic level, but it's like at least pushing towards that thematic level of the games that might eventually deal with that issue. Even when like after that meeting with the Empire and after they raise the floating continent, which is where we're going to stop, sort of from a plot perspective. Like you've had something to do with that. So like just very quickly before we wrap up here, what are some final thoughts or final things that we haven't talked about the world of balance in the first half of this game, that everybody on the podcast wanted to talk about that we haven't touched on yet?
I just think it feels very appropriate that just like in the game itself, Strago and Realm are getting the short end of the stick just by coming in too late, because we're not even going to talk about their segment. And
Correct.
yeah,
But also Interceptor is a very good boy.
yeah, one of the best boys in video games.
Random fun fact: if you sit down in the dining car in the train with Shadow in front, he feeds his meal to Interceptor.
Oh
Love
my
that.
god!
Oh, and speaking of Shadow, just like one of these other kind of like narrative secrets of the game is just like if you end up doing this really weird thing where you only take 3 party members instead of 4 out of Nourish, and then you do end up paying him to recruit him in, forget the name of the town, but in the one you go to shortly after that, and then you sleep at that inn, you start getting these really interesting flashbacks that reveal more about his character. Just definitely one of the coolest secrets about the game, and one that I didn't uncover for the longest time. But yeah, really cool character and a really cool way to present a character and try to develop a character in
I
a much more secretive way.
I agree. And I had no idea you could do that in the first half of the game. Like I knew you could do it in the second half, but I did not know in the first half you could do that. That's very cool.
I'm just also amazed that like the entire way from Doma to the Phantom Forest and up to the train, up until the train, he has 1/16 of a chance of leaving your party at any given time, leaving you with just 2 characters.
I was very glad
Save,
he did not leave me this time.
save often.
Yes.
Indeed. Okay, so that leads us up to towards the end of the first half of Final Fantasy VI. We will talk about the next half of Final Fantasy VI on our next episode, and that is how much we know at this point. We are literally recording this on the same day as the PlayStation Direct. I don't know, the PlayStation something. And I was waiting for that to figure out what we're going to do on our next episode. It hasn't really helped me, but we'll figure it out. um, so in terms of housekeeping, if you want to get in touch with us, you can do that in a lot of different ways. You can email us retro@rpgfan.com. You can also find us on Facebook, on Twitter, on Instagram, on Discord, on YouTube, on Twitch, which streams almost every day. Scott is a machine. We also have a shop where you can buy like RPG Fan t-shirts. If you go to rpgfan.com, we have a whole link for that where you can go do that. We also have 2 other fine podcasts. Random Encounter, which does every 2 weeks. It's mostly about randomness, mostly about current events. And also Rhythm Encounter, which is the other 2 weeks of those 2 weeks. And it's about RPG music. You can also review us on Apple Podcasts, Google Play, Spotify, anywhere you find podcasts, you'll probably find Retro Encounter. So that's a good place to do it. But also, if you want to get in touch with us, let's talk about the panelists. So, Lucy, if someone wants to get in touch with you, what's the best way to do that?
Well, they draw a pentagram on the floor. No, actually, as being part of the social media team, you can find me on Facebook. You can find me on Instagram. You can find me on Twitter. I'm sometimes the one answering your questions when you are shouting into the void. And I'm Jess Idris at most social media platforms.
And Aleks, what about you?
Not around on the social medias right now, but if you want to get in touch, feel free to email me at alexfraniczek@gmail.com, just following the spelling of my name as listed on the website.
Perfect. And Ben, what about you?
Yeah, I'm also not on social media.
So smart.
You won't find me on Twitter. But you could email me as well at benloganlove@gmail.com if you want.
Excellent. What about you, Lucas?
I am still on social media for some reason. You can find me on Twitter as Rafegal, RAEFGALL, and you can also find me on YouTube with that same name.
Perfect. And while I am on social media, you can't find me because of what I do for a living. So if you want to get in touch with me, you can email me, ZachW@RPGFan.com, or you can also find me on RPG Fans Discord at ZachW. And, I'm really looking forward to talking about the second half of this game with you guys. Ben, I'm really looking forward to finding out what you think about the second half of the game.
Yeah, I'm interested since it opens up a lot. I'm curious to see
It sure does.
what it's like. Yeah.
It will make you think twice about sashimi for the rest of your life.
And thank you, listeners. Good night and good luck.